Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be talking about something that's very important when managing your property for whitetails. A lot of the videos and a lot of the content that we put together on this channel is geared towards getting opportunities at that older buck in the neighborhood. But in today's video, we're going to be talking about doe management and why you might want to consider harvesting a few does off of your property. Doe management is extremely important, and if you want to maximize the effectiveness of your property, your neighborhood, then you need to try to harvest the appropriate amount of does for your area, or your property or your hunting experience could suffer as a result. And I did want to start this video on doe management out by saying that not every area, not every property is the same when it comes to doe management. There are going to be properties out there that need to be harvesting a lot of does every single season. While I would say a majority of properties out there should be harvesting a few does, but there are also going to be properties that don't need to be harvesting any does and shouldn't be harvesting any does. So just understand that doe management is not something that's a one size fits all. But now let's dive into a few reasons as to why doe management is important and why you might want to consider harvesting a few does off of your property. And while we're not going to be able to talk about everything as it relates to doe management in this video, I did want to talk about 3 reasons that, depending on your scenario, you might want to consider harvesting a few does off of your property. And the first is improved local habitat. Every area is going to have a different whitetail population, or what's called a deer density, and that's deer per square mile. At the same time, areas are going to be able to support a different amount of deer. This is called an area's carrying capacity. So every area is going to have a different deer density, and every area is going to have a different carrying capacity. And there are a lot of factors that go into determining what an area's carrying capacity is. A few would be, the amount of food that's available, as well as the amount of quality cover that's available. But it's important to understand that if you're trying to have a quality herd in any given area, that your deer density does not exceed the carrying capacity. And this is where doe management comes in. If you have an area that has too many deer, most likely too many does or antlerless deer. I'm not sure if we have any area here in Michigan with our hunting culture that's being overrun by bucks, but if you have an area that has too many deer per square mile, it's exceeding the carrying capacity, then that's going to have a negative impact on the local habitat. What happens in areas with too many deer is they will move through your property like a swarm of locusts, and this will have a negative impact on the local habitat. Throughout the winter months, as the deer herd moves through your property, they're going to select those preferred browse species, the preferred early successional growth, those shrubs, young trees, oftentimes leaving the undesirable species alone. And in areas where you have too many deer, where the deer density is exceeding the carrying capacity, a lot of times this will set that preferred browse back. This is the browse that you want on your property. Now, this browse will rebound the following growing season, but if this happens year after year, that the preferred browse continues to get set back while leaving the undesirable species alone, this will allow those undesirable species to thrive and potentially take over the local habitat. And that's one of the last things that we want to have happen as a landowner or a land manager, is to have our property dominated by those undesirable species or those invasive species, because not only is our property or area going to become less attractive to the local deer herd, it's also going to lower the carrying capacity because we're not going to have nearly as much food, quality food, available. And that's going to lead us right into the next point that I wanted to touch on with doe management and why it's so important and why you might want to consider harvesting a few does off of your property this season. And that's that it will improve the health of your deer herd. The more quality food that you have on your property or in the area, the more quality cover that you have on your property, the lower the stress levels will be on the local deer herd. And the lower the stress level, the healthier the deer herd. If you're in an area where the deer density is exceeding the carrying capacity, again, an area that has too many deer, there's a good chance that there's not enough quality food to get those deer through the winter months. Now, that does not mean that the deer are going to starve to death during the winter, but it does mean that they're not going to be as healthy as they go into the spring. Whitetails are survivors. They can go quite a while on a low quality diet. The probability of winter kill here in the lower peninsula is extremely low. But we don't want our deer just to survive winter. We want our deer herd to thrive. We want to bring a healthy deer herd into the spring. If you're bringing a deer herd in to the spring that is just surviving on low quality forage throughout your property, they're going to need to spend a lot of energy recuperating and recovering from the winter months instead of spending that energy on milk production, fawn production, antler development. However, if you're in an area with a healthier deer population, an area that the deer density does not exceed the carrying capacity, then you're going to be bringing in a healthier deer herd into the spring. You're going to have healthier fawns, higher fawn recruitment, and your local bucks are going to be able to express more of their genetic potential when it comes to antler development. So hopefully that makes sense, and you guys can see that those first 2 points are closely related. If you're in an area with too many deer, where the deer density is exceeding the carrying capacity, then the local deer herd will likely move through the area, move through your property, selecting the quality forage and wipe it out, bringing a less healthy deer herd into the spring because there's just not enough food to go around. And because of that, the does are not going to be able to put as much energy into fawn production, milk production, while the bucks, they're not going to be able to express their true genetic potential when it comes to antler development. But because I know a lot of you guys come to this channel for strategies on getting closer to those older bucks in the neighborhood, this next point on why doe harvest is important is more hunting strategy related, and why having more balanced sex ratios can get you closer and give you more opportunities at your target buck. All of the strategies that we talk about on this channel on getting opportunities at the local bucks are geared towards what is that buck doing during any given part of the season. What is he doing during the early part of the season? What is he doing during the pre-rut, during the rut? Depending on his behavior, that's going to change our strategy for that particular hunt. And what are those bucks doing during the rut? They're trying to breed as many does as possible. A lot of these does are going into heat, going into estrus around the same time. So a lot of these bucks are going to be breeding does at the same time. It doesn't matter if they're an old buck or a young buck, they're going to get a chance to breed a doe. And again, if you have an area with too many does, there's going to be does that are not being bred. And then when the buck that you're after is done breeding his doe, he's going to have an easy time finding another doe. In an area with a more balanced buck to doe ratio, when that buck is finished breeding that current doe that he's with and is going to go off to find a new one, it's going to take him much longer. And this is when those rut scenarios play out, those rut strategies play out. It is when that buck is searching for that next hot doe. That's when he's going to search the downwind edge of that doe bedding area. He's going to travel between the two bedding areas. He's going to check that food plot for the does. He's going to move through that pinch point. He's going to move a lot more during daylight because it's going to be a lot harder for him to find that next receptive doe if you have a more balanced buck to doe ratio. So those are a few reasons as to why doe management is so important and why you might want to consider harvesting a few does off of your property before the season ends. But what if you're somebody who doesn't know whether or not they should be harvesting does? And that's something that I want to talk about next. There are just a few things that you can look for on your property to help you determine whether or not a doe harvest is necessary. And there is nothing scientific about anything on this list. These are simply indicators to help you determine whether or not you have too many deer on your property or in your area, and hopefully help you determine whether harvesting a few does would be beneficial. And the first way would just be personal observation, whether it's from the stand or from scouting. If you're scouting from the cabin, scouting from the road, are you seeing more antlerless deer, more does than you are bucks? And obviously, does move a little bit more during daylight than bucks. A lot of times bucks are more nocturnal, so you do have to take that into consideration. But are you seeing a lot more does on your property in the area than you are seeing bucks? This might be an indicator that you might need to harvest a few does to get that sex ratio, that buck to doe ratio, more in line. Another great way to gauge the doe population, the buck to doe ratio in your area, would be with trail cameras, especially if you're somebody who runs a lot of trail cameras. The trail cameras will allow you to monitor deer movement on your property at the same time. For example, if you're seeing 8 to 10 does in one food plot, 8 to 10 does in a different food plot, and if you have another camera in the middle of the woods and you're seeing a group of 6 heading out to the food plot, we're starting to creep up on 26 deer on 3 different cameras. That's a good indicator that you have too many does on the property and a doe harvest is needed. And if you're getting pictures of several doe family groups on your property at the same time, this is an easier way to determine how many deer are using your property at any given time. And if you can combine your trail camera data with your neighbor's trail camera data, then you can get a pretty good idea as to how many deer are in the area and whether or not, again, a doe harvest would be necessary or beneficial for your area. Another indicator that you have too many deer or too many does on your property or in the area is that if your property is experiencing heavy browse pressure. Throughout the winter months, as you're working on different habitat improvements, take some time to evaluate the browse on your property. And if you're noticing that a lot of your early successional growth, the new growth on your property is browsed on heavily, then this is a good indicator that you have too many deer in the area and that a doe harvest would be beneficial for your property or your area. Along the same lines of looking at the pressure on your woody browse or the pressure on your early successional growth, would be to review your food plots and whether or not you're carrying food throughout the winter months. If you're walking your property after the season, or maybe you notice this during the season as well, that your food plots have been eaten to the dirt, this is another indicator that you do not have enough food to go around and that you have too many deer in the area. But like I said earlier, guys, this is not an exact science. These are just indicators. And there are a lot of factors that could go into each one of these. For example, with food plots, if you're in an area without a lot of food and you only planted a 1/4 acre food plot and the deer mowed it to the ground, well, that makes sense to me because there's not a lot of food in the area to begin with. And if you planted a food plot, that's going to be the most desirable thing there. And if you only have a 1/4 acre plot, what that tells me is you need to be providing more food. It might not be that there's too many deer in the area. It might just be that you don't have enough food on your property. But every property, every area should be looked at individually. Every area is going to have a different deer density and every area is going to have a different carrying capacity. You just want to make sure that the deer density in your area does not exceed the carrying capacity because, again, you could have negative impacts on your deer herd and your habitat. But that's going to do it for this video, guys, on doe management and a few reasons why it's important and why you might want to consider taking a few does off of your property. If you guys do have any questions, please drop those in the comment section below. I'll get back to those as soon as I can, and we will see you guys in the next video.